So here at my workbench, but I'm not working on a drone today. I'm going to work on this block of wood, and I'm going to build a fishing lure. And this is the chronicle of that. Stay tuned. The first thing I'm going to do is draw the center mark for both ends of my balsa block. That way I know exactly where center is anytime that I'm carving into it. The next thing I'm doing is drawing the side profile and top profile for what I want to carve out. I'm going to carve this into a square bill type crankbait, and this will be the general shape. Fast forward a few months, I haven't touched the crankbait, but here it is, just the way that we carved it out before, or drew it out before. And I'm about to start carving. Now there are two different ways that you can begin doing this. You can either take a razor blade, such as this one, or you can actually cut out along the lines with a coping saw or something similar. If you have bandsaw, that's even better, but I do everything by hand, so we do it the hard way. With the razor blade, I'm going to carve out the edges and make it a little bit rounder on every corner. This is a very slow process if you do it this way. If you do it with a saw, it's a lot quicker, but you take off larger chunks and you're not as precise with the cuts. So I'm going to take my coping saw and I'm going to cut along that line and get that general shape. For the sake of speed of the video, I cut everything out with the coping saw, and as you can see, we have kind of a rough outline of a crankbait. I'm going to redraw the lines that I had on top again, because I'd cut most of them off, and get that actual fish shape going. Again, going to use the coping saw. You can use the razor blade if you want to, or a knife. It's just a lot quicker if you saw things off a chunk at a time. Something I wanted to mention, a benchtop vice grip is very helpful if you're going to do the saw method. I recommend these Amazon ones. They're pretty cheap, under 30 bucks, and they come with these nylon grips that come off, and they don't mar the wood nearly as bad as just if it were raw metal. This is looking rough, but that's what happens when you do cuts like that with the saw. You get a rough looking piece of wood. I'm going to go over this with the razor blade and smooth out all the edges and get it into a more rounded fish shape. So I've got it smoothed out with the razor blade, and it's still not perfectly smooth, but it's way better than it was. Now, this step should be really, really meticulous, and you don't want to take off too much material at a time. Otherwise, you're going to take off too much, and you can't put any back on. You can always cut some or sand some off later, so it's better to leave more than to have not enough. The next thing I'm going to do is grab the crustiest piece of sandpaper that I can find in my garage and rub it all over the bait and get it smooth. I have no idea what grit this is. Oh, 150, look at that. So we're just gonna sand it smooth and see how it comes out. After you finish sanding smooth, check all your angles for the shape. Make sure that's the shape that you like and you're ready to move on. If you don't like the shape, keep sanding, keep cutting until you get to a shape that you like. If you've gone too far, throw it away. So if you like the shape of the bait, you can go ahead and draw your center line down the middle of it if you decide to do a through wire construction. Through wire is harder to do, but for a balsa like this, I recommend it because it's going to give you a more robust bait. You can also do a twist wire by putting this into your drill or vice grip and twisting, or they have these ready-made loop eyes that you can buy at Jan's or Mudhole. But these tend to pull out if you don't glue them in properly, and with balsa, because it's so soft, you're going to want to do that through wire construction just for safety. For the length of the wire you want to cut, I give it at least a 1.5 length because you're going to bend this in several places. If you need more, go with a lot more than what you think you need, because you can always cut off an end of it or make it shorter. It's always better to be safe than sorry. So cut down the center line of the bait while it's in a vise, and you'll have space for a through wire. Measuring where the bends should go is one of the trickiest parts, and this may take you a little while to figure out, but I always start with a loop like this, sometimes a square one, sometimes it's more of an oblong shape, and then I put it up into the bait and have it stick out just enough to have the nose of the wire come out, as if I'm going to put a line tie on it. After you measure that space, you want to make sure that you have the line or the wire coming out of the bottom of the bait in the right place for the bottom hook hanger. Now this is critically important because that's going to be the balance point for the rest of the bait, and if you get this wrong, then you're going to have to start all over with new wire. I did a pretty good job of measuring that one. Probably could still make it a little bit tighter to the bait, but that's okay. Once we paint everything and clear coat, it's going to look just fine. The last one we need to do is the tail end, and for that I'm just going to make a kind of mirror image of the front one with another loop, so that way we have a hook hanger on the back of the bait. Now if you're following along and making a bait along with me, and you're cursing me at this point, that's because the magic of video editing allowed me to do this a lot easier than what it looked like. This is a difficult process, and if you mess up a few times with the wire, don't get disheartened. It isn't easy. It's not going to come out the right way the first time, and you're going to end up with broken baits, broken wires. It happens, but this is how it should look once it's all said and done. The next thing I want to do is figure out where the lip is going to go in this bait. For this one, I'm going to use a generic shape from Jan's Netcraft. You can also get these at the Mud Hole or any other online retailer. You can also use the dividers that come in a tackle box and cut them to shape. But with this one, I'm going to use a ready-made shape and just cut into the front of the bait at an angle. Now, the steeper the angle that you put the lip into, the deeper it'll dive. However, it will also lessen the action of the bait. So if you put the bill in at an angle like this, it will be more like a wake bait, whereas the further forward you angle it, the more it'll dive. Now be careful, don't go too far forward, because your line pull point is actually on the nose of the bait, and you'll notice that most deep diving crankbaits actually have the pull point on the lip itself. It changes the dynamic of the bait and the way that it hunts in the water. You want to make the cut with the appropriate size saw, and now you have a slot for the lip. One of the things I like to do is cut a notch into the blade itself. That way it'll lock into the wire better on the bait when you install it. This is optional, and if you don't have a carbide blade like I do, you can do this with a Dremel or even sandpaper, just to make it a little more secure when you're putting it together. There it is, test fit all together, and we're going to then add some weight to this bait right behind the hook hanger. You can either add the weight in front of or behind the hook hanger, or even off to the side. I don't recommend drilling into balsa because it is so soft. You really need a rotary tool or to dig it out with a knife. It's just too soft, and you will break the wood if you try to drill it with too large of a drill bit. So here's how it'll look after you Dremel it out. I flattened 2 bullet weights with a hammer and placed them into the groove that I cut with my Dremel. You can use split shot or any other weight that will fit in the area that you want to use. And I vary this bit depending upon the bait shape and what I'm doing. for different lures. Of course, they're going to have different balance points, and you're going to have to use a different weight appropriately. To lock everything in, we're going to use super thin super glue. You want to make sure you use the thin one, not like the dollar store kind or the regular kind. It'll make your life so much better. And the miraculous powder that is baking soda. I just have a little stick in here, and this is what I use to dribble the baking soda in the right areas for when I'm filling up the bait. You want to use this baking soda liberally, but you also don't want to put in too much at a time. Otherwise, you're going to have some that doesn't get any glue on it and becomes just powder inside the bait. I gave the bait a super glue bath and the weights are installed. But keep in mind that super glue is a pretty potent chemical. You want to do this with good ventilation. Wear a mask, wear goggles, because you don't want that in your eye at all. And spills happen. Just be careful. You can do some light sanding to the bait now that it's been glued and sealed. I put some masking tape over the bill, and I'm going to hit it with a rattle can to paint it. You can do hand painting, you can do airbrushing, but for me, I don't have an airbrush station or room for that, so we're just going to go the easy way with this one and just rattle can it. Simple shad color, chrome on the bottom, black on the back. Put you guys in fast forward again. I've painted it with a rattle can, just spray paint, did the top black, did the bottom silver chrome. Put a couple eyes on it, sticky eyes from, I don't even know. I think I got them a long time ago from Tackle Warehouse. I can paint on eyes too, but this one I went with the stick-ons. And I've been fighting a lot about a clear coat. Clear coat is really important because most of the paint that you can buy is washable, and if you put it in water, it'll just wipe right off. So clear coat, I've been using nail polish, and it's been okay, but not really the best. It'll flake off after a couple of fish and just not look right. So I've been looking at other options, and I found this UV resin from Amazon. It's really cheap for this bottle. And what I've been doing is dropping it on, painting it with a small brush, and then letting it sit out in the sun for a couple hours. So far, that's been working pretty well, and I did a couple of tests before I did this one for the video. And turned out okay. I know you can't really tell that there's a clear coat on there, but it's nice and hard, and the paint is not coming off. I think if a fish bites this, it'll be alright. So, we'll see how it goes. Look at that wobble. I'd say that's good crankbait. This is getting a little silly now. Should I have been making my own baits for like forever? Really? Really?